Question 1. Strategic planning requires UNIAGRARIA to optimize its admissions and resource allocation processes to better serve its agrarian mission. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of effective, ethical, and legally compliant institutional management within the Colombian higher education context? Option A. Implementing a multi-stage evaluation system that incorporates academic merit, alignment with UNIAGRARIA agrarian focus, and assessment of potential for contribution to rural development, while ensuring transparency and adherence to all relevant Colombian educational regulations. Option B. Significantly reducing the number of available admission slots across all programs to streamline the evaluation process and decrease administrative burden, irrespective of applicant quality or program demand. Option C. Prioritizing the fastest processing of applications, even if it means less thorough review of candidate qualifications, to quickly fill available resources and meet institutional targets. Option D. Introducing a new, complex scoring algorithm for admissions that is not publicly disclosed and bypasses existing departmental review committees to expedite decision-making. The correct answer is A. Implementing a multi-stage evaluation system that incorporates academic merit, alignment with UNIAGRARIA agrarian focus, and assessment of potential for contribution to rural development, while ensuring transparency and adherence to all relevant Colombian educational regulations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's strategic goals with the ethical and regulatory obligations governing academic admissions and resource allocation. UNIAGRARIA, as an agrarian university, has a specific mission and mandate, likely outlined in its foundational statutes and internal regulations, which guide its operational decisions. The challenge lies in ensuring that any process optimization for admissions and resource allocation aligns with these foundational principles and applicable Colombian educational laws, without compromising fairness, transparency, or the quality of education. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review and potential redesign of the admissions and resource allocation processes, ensuring they are efficient, equitable, and demonstrably aligned with UNIAGRARIA mission and the legal framework for higher education in Colombia. This approach prioritizes a systematic, data-informed, and stakeholder-inclusive methodology. It acknowledges that process optimization is not merely about speed or cost reduction, but about enhancing the effectiveness and integrity of the university's core functions. Specifically, it would involve analyzing current bottlenecks, identifying areas for improvement, and proposing solutions that are compliant with Colombian educational legislation, such as those governing university autonomy, admission criteria, and the responsible use of institutional resources. This aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative efficiency expected of public or private higher education institutions in Colombia. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of applicants, without a clear, justifiable rationale tied to UNIAGRARIA capacity or academic program requirements, would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. Such an approach could lead to discriminatory practices, violate principles of equal access to education, and potentially contravene Colombian laws that promote educational opportunities. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of processing over thoroughness and fairness in evaluating candidates would undermine the integrity of the admissions process. This could result in admitting less qualified students or unfairly rejecting deserving ones, leading to reputational damage and potential legal challenges. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses established internal approval processes and regulatory compliance checks for the sake of rapid implementation risks violating UNIAGRARIA statutes and Colombian administrative law, which mandate due diligence and adherence to established procedures. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and its scope. Second, identify all relevant internal policies, university statutes, and Colombian national laws and regulations pertaining to higher education admissions and resource management. Third, explore various potential solutions, evaluating each against these legal and ethical frameworks, as well as UNIAGRARIA strategic objectives and mission. Fourth, consult with relevant stakeholders, including academic departments, admissions committees, legal counsel, and administrative staff. And finally, select and implement the solution that best balances efficiency, equity, compliance, and the university's overarching mission. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate a significant philanthropic offer from a multinational agro-industrial corporation interested in funding a new research initiative at UNIAGRARIA. The corporation has expressed a strong preference for research directly related to optimizing crop yields for their primary product lines, with a stipulation that the research findings be shared exclusively with them for a period of 5 years before public dissemination. The university's strategic plan emphasizes interdisciplinary research in sustainable agriculture and rural development. Considering these factors, which approach best aligns with UNIAGRARIA academic mission and ethical obligations? Option A. Decline the donation due to the restrictive exclusivity clause and the narrow focus of the proposed research, which deviates from UNIAGRARIA emphasis on sustainable agriculture and rural development. Option B. Redirect the corporation's interest towards funding existing UNIAGRARIA research projects in rural development that are already underway, without significant modification to the original donation terms. Option C. Propose a collaborative research framework that aligns the corporation's interest in crop yield optimization with UNIAGRARIA broader goals of sustainable agriculture, while negotiating terms for timely public dissemination of findings and ensuring academic independence. Option D. Accept the donation as proposed, prioritizing the immediate financial benefit and the opportunity to enhance crop yield research, assuming the corporation's interests will indirectly benefit the university's agricultural programs. The correct answer is C. Propose a collaborative research framework that aligns the corporation's interest in crop yield optimization with UNIAGRARIA broader goals of sustainable agriculture, while negotiating terms for timely public dissemination of findings and ensuring academic independence. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to balance the university's academic mission with the practical realities of resource allocation and potential external influences. The applicant must demonstrate an understanding of how to prioritize initiatives that align with UNIAGRARIA strategic goals, while also considering the financial implications and the potential for external partnerships to enhance, rather than detract from, the university's core functions. The pressure to secure funding can create a conflict between pursuing the most impactful academic projects and accepting funding that might come with restrictive conditions or misaligned objectives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough evaluation of the proposed project's alignment with UNIAGRARIA's strategic academic plan and its potential to contribute to the university's research and educational objectives. This approach prioritizes the academic mission, ensuring that any external funding serves to enhance, not dictate, the university's direction. It also necessitates a careful assessment of the donor's intentions and the potential for the funding to create dependencies or compromise academic freedom. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of educational institutions to maintain their integrity and focus on their primary purpose. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that solely focuses on securing the largest possible donation without a critical assessment of its academic relevance or donor intent fails to uphold the university's mission. This could lead to the misallocation of resources towards projects that do not advance UNIAGRARIA strategic goals, potentially diluting its academic focus and reputation. It also risks accepting funding that may come with implicit or explicit conditions that compromise academic independence. An approach that dismisses the donation outright due to its source, without exploring potential synergies or the possibility of negotiating terms, represents a missed opportunity and a failure to engage in strategic partnership building. While caution is warranted, a complete rejection without due diligence can hinder the university's growth and its ability to leverage external resources for academic advancement. An approach that prioritizes the donor's specific project proposal over UNIAGRARIA existing academic priorities, even if the donor's project has some merit, risks diverting resources and attention from more critical institutional needs or established research directions. This can lead to a fragmented academic landscape and a failure to achieve overarching strategic objectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university administration must adopt a strategic and ethically grounded decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the institution's mission, vision, and strategic plan. 2. Conducting thorough due diligence on potential partnerships and funding sources, assessing alignment and potential risks. 3. prioritizing initiatives that offer the greatest academic and societal impact consistent with institutional goals. 4. Engaging in transparent communication and negotiation to ensure mutually beneficial outcomes that uphold academic integrity. 5. Regularly reviewing and evaluating the impact of partnerships and funding to ensure continued alignment and effectiveness. Question 3. The performance metrics show a significant increase in application processing time and a higher than desired rate of incomplete applications, potentially impacting the university's ability to meet enrollment targets for its specialized agrarian programs. Considering UNIAGRARIA commitment to accessible and quality education, which approach best addresses these challenges while upholding regulatory and ethical standards? Option A. Increase the minimum academic score required for application consideration to reduce the overall volume of applications, thereby decreasing processing time and the number of incomplete submissions. Option B. Implement a streamlined, automated initial screening process that prioritizes applications based on a single, easily quantifiable criterion to expedite review and reduce staff workload. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire admissions workflow, from initial application submission to final enrollment, to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement in clarity, support, and evaluation, ensuring all steps align with UNIAGRARIA mission and Colombian higher education regulations. Option D. Focus solely on reducing the number of staff involved in application processing to cut costs, assuming that efficiency will naturally improve with fewer resources. Correct answer is B. Implement a streamlined, automated initial screening process that prioritizes applications based on a single, easily quantifiable criterion to expedite review and reduce staff workload. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficiency and resource allocation with the ethical imperative to provide equitable access to educational opportunities, as mandated by UNIAGRARIA foundational principles and Colombian higher education regulations. The university's commitment to agrarian development and social responsibility, as outlined in its statutes and relevant Colombian Ministry of Education guidelines, necessitates a fair and transparent process for admitting students who can contribute to these goals. The performance metrics, while useful for identifying areas of improvement, must not be used in a manner that creates undue barriers or discriminates against potential students, particularly those from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds or regions, which is a key consideration in Colombian educational policy. The correct approach involves a holistic review of the admissions process, focusing on identifying and mitigating systemic inefficiencies that might disproportionately affect certain applicant groups. This means analyzing the entire student journey from application to enrollment, looking for bottlenecks or areas where support is lacking. The justification for this approach lies in UNIAGRARIA mission to promote inclusive and quality agrarian education. Colombian law, specifically Law 30 of 1992, General Law of Higher Education, and subsequent decrees from the Ministry of Education, emphasizes equitable access and the social function of higher education. Therefore, optimizing processes must align with these principles, ensuring that improvements do not inadvertently exclude deserving candidates. The focus should be on enhancing the applicant experience and ensuring fair evaluation, rather than solely on reducing applicant numbers or processing times at the expense of thoroughness. An incorrect approach would be to implement a strict, arbitrary cutoff based solely on a single performance metric, such as the number of applications processed per staff member, without considering the qualitative aspects of the application review or the potential impact on diversity. This fails to acknowledge the complexity of evaluating candidates for specialized agrarian programs and violates the spirit of inclusive education. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of processing over the thoroughness of candidate evaluation, potentially leading to the rejection of qualified applicants or the acceptance of unqualified ones, which undermines the academic integrity of the university and its mission. Furthermore, focusing solely on reducing the number of applicants without a clear rationale tied to institutional capacity or program goals would be a misapplication of performance metrics and could be seen as a barrier to access, contrary to Colombian educational policy. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the university's mission and values, then examines the specific regulatory and ethical obligations. This involves data analysis to identify problems, But critically, it requires qualitative assessment to understand the root causes and potential impacts of proposed solutions. Solutions should be evaluated not only for their efficiency gains, but also for their alignment with principles of fairness, equity, and academic quality, as defined by UNIAGRARIA internal regulations and Colombian law. Question 4. The control framework reveals a situation where a prominent agricultural business, a significant potential donor and internship provider for UNIAGRARIA, has strongly recommended a specific candidate for admission, implying that their support for the university might be contingent on this candidate's acceptance, despite the candidate's academic profile being borderline according to standard admission metrics. Which of the following actions best upholds UNIAGRARIA commitment to fair and merit-based admissions under Colombian educational regulations? Option A. Evaluate the candidate solely based on the established academic criteria and standardized test scores, as outlined in UNIAGRARIA official admission policy, while formally acknowledging the recommendation, but ensuring it does not override objective evaluation. Option B. Decline the candidate's admission outright due to their borderline academic profile, without fully considering the potential benefits of the business's relationship with the university. Option C. Inform the agricultural business that their recommendation carries significant weight and that the university will make every effort to accommodate their preferred candidate, even if it means slightly adjusting the interpretation of admission metrics. Option D. Prioritize the candidate's admission to secure the continued support and potential future donations from the influential agricultural business, thereby ensuring resources for other university programs. The correct answer is A. Evaluate the candidate solely based on the established academic criteria and standardized test scores, as outlined in UNIAGRARIA official admission policy, while formally acknowledging the recommendation, but ensuring it does not override objective evaluation. Explanation. The control framework reveals a potential conflict of interest scenario within UNIAGRARIA admissions process, specifically concerning the influence of external stakeholders on candidate selection. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to merit-based admissions with the need to maintain positive relationships with influential entities, such as agricultural sector businesses that might offer scholarships or internships. The core tension lies in ensuring that the selection process remains objective and fair, free from undue pressure or preferential treatment, thereby upholding the integrity of UNIAGRARIA academic standards and its reputation. The correct approach involves a rigorous and transparent application of established admission criteria, documented in UNIAGRARIA internal regulations and the Colombian Ministry of Education's guidelines for higher education institutions. This approach prioritizes objective evaluation of academic merit, standardized test scores, and relevant extracurricular achievements as outlined in the official admission policies. Any external recommendations or affiliations are to be considered supplementary information, not determinative factors, and must be disclosed and managed according to UNIAGRARIA conflict of interest policy. This ensures adherence to principles of equity and academic excellence, safeguarding the university's commitment to providing equal opportunities to all applicants. An incorrect approach that prioritizes accommodating external recommendations without strict adherence to objective criteria would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This would violate the principle of fairness and could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, undermining the academic rigor of UNIAGRARIA. Such an action could also contravene Article 2 of Law 30 of 1992 of Colombia, which establishes the principles of access to higher education based on merit and capacity, and could expose the university to sanctions from the Ministry of Education for noncompliance with admission regulations. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively applying admission criteria based on the perceived influence of the recommending entity, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and could be construed as a form of corruption or undue influence, eroding public trust in UNIAGRARIA. It would also fail to uphold the spirit of meritocracy that should govern university admissions. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding and strict adherence to UNIAGRARIA internal admission policies and relevant Colombian educational laws. When faced with external pressure or recommendations, professionals must 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consult the university's conflict of interest policy and admission regulations. 3. Ensure that all decisions are based on objective, predefined criteria. 4. Document all interactions and decisions transparently. 5. If necessary, escalate the matter to a higher authority within the university for guidance and oversight to ensure compliance and maintain ethical standards. Question 5. Investigation of how the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA should respond to a local community's urgent request to lease a portion of its protected research land for immediate, intensive monoculture farming to address a sudden economic downturn, considering the Foundation's mandate for sustainable agricultural practices and long-term research. Option A. Initiate a formal consultation process with the community to understand their needs. Conduct a thorough environmental and economic impact assessment of the proposed monoculture farming on the research land, and explore alternative solutions that align with the Foundation's sustainability goals and regulatory framework. Option B. Reject the community's request outright, citing the land's protected status for research purposes, and offer no further engagement or alternative solutions. Option C. Immediately approve the community's request to lease the land for monoculture farming to provide swift economic relief, as supporting local communities is a key aspect of the Foundation's social responsibility. Option D. Agree to lease the land for monoculture farming, prioritizing the potential for immediate rental income to fund other Foundation projects, without conducting further assessments or community dialogue. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal consultation process with the community to understand their needs. Conduct a thorough environmental and economic impact assessment of the proposed monoculture farming on the research land, and explore alternative solutions that align with the Foundation's sustainability goals and regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial needs of a community and the long-term sustainability principles mandated by Agrarian University foundations. The Foundation's mission, as likely outlined in its foundational statutes and operational guidelines, which would be the primary regulatory framework for UNIAGRARIA entrance exam, emphasizes responsible land stewardship and the perpetuation of agricultural knowledge and practices. Balancing these with the urgent, albeit potentially short-sighted, demands of a community for immediate economic benefit requires careful ethical and regulatory consideration. The correct approach involves prioritizing the long-term viability and educational mission of the Foundation, as dictated by its governing regulations and statutes. This means engaging in a transparent and consultative process with the community to understand their needs, while simultaneously evaluating proposed action against the Foundation's core objectives and any specific environmental or land use regulations applicable to its holdings. The justification lies in adhering to the Foundation's mandate, which is likely established by Colombian law governing educational institutions and foundations, and potentially specific decrees related to agricultural land use and conservation. Acting in accordance with these foundational principles ensures the sustainability of the Foundation's resources for future generations and upholds its educational and research commitments. An incorrect approach would be to immediately agree to the community's request for intensive monoculture farming without thorough assessment. This fails to consider the potential for soil degradation, biodiversity loss, and the long-term economic and environmental consequences, which would likely contravene the Foundation's sustainability mandates and potentially violate environmental regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the community's concerns outright without dialogue. This demonstrates a lack of stakeholder engagement and could lead to community conflict, undermining the Foundation's social responsibility and its ability to operate effectively within the region, potentially violating principles of good governance and community relations expected of such institutions. Finally, agreeing to the request solely based on the potential for immediate financial gain, without considering the long-term environmental and educational impacts, would represent a failure to uphold the fiduciary duty to the Foundation and its mission, prioritizing short-term profit over sustainable development and educational objectives. Professionals in such a situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the Foundation's governing documents and applicable Colombian laws. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of the proposed action's environmental, social, and economic impacts. Crucially, Open and honest communication with all stakeholders, including the community, is essential to build trust and find mutually beneficial solutions that align with the Foundation's long-term mission and regulatory obligations. Question 6. The efficiency study reveals that a member of the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA Admissions Committee has a close relative applying for admission to a program where the committee member holds significant influence. According to UNIAGRARIA internal regulations and ethical guidelines for academic admissions, what is the most appropriate course of action for the committee member? Option A. Discreetly advocate for the applicant's admission to other committee members without directly participating in the formal evaluation or voting process. Option B. Proceed with evaluating the applicant's file, trusting their personal objectivity to ensure a fair assessment despite the relationship. Option C. Inform the admissions committee chair of the relationship, but continue to participate in discussions to ensure the applicant's qualifications are fully considered. Option D. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the admissions committee chair and recuse themselves from all discussions and voting related to the applicant's file. Correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the admissions committee chair and recuse themselves from all discussions and voting related to the applicant's file. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict of interest within the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA Admissions Committee. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to fair and transparent admissions with the personal relationships of committee members. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of UNIAGRARIA internal regulations and ethical guidelines concerning conflicts of interest, ensuring that decisions are made impartially and in the best interest of the institution and its applicants. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the relevant university authority, followed by recusal from any decision-making processes directly affecting the applicant. This aligns with the principles of integrity and impartiality expected of university staff and committees. UNIAGRARIA internal regulations, which would likely mirror general principles of good governance and academic ethics, would mandate such a procedure to prevent bias and maintain the credibility of the admissions process. This ensures that all applicants are evaluated on merit, free from undue influence. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the evaluation without disclosure, assuming personal objectivity can overcome the familial tie. This violates the fundamental ethical principle of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. It undermines the trust placed in the admissions committee and could lead to accusations of favoritism, damaging UNIAGRARIA reputation. Another incorrect approach is to disclose the relationship but still participate in discussions without recusing oneself. While disclosure is a step, it is insufficient if the individual continues to influence the decision-making process, thereby failing to eliminate the potential for bias. Finally, attempting to subtly influence other committee members without direct involvement in the final vote is also an unacceptable approach, as it still constitutes an attempt to exert undue influence and bypass the established conflict of interest protocols. Professionals in such situations should follow a clear decision-making framework. First, identify any potential conflict of interest. Second, consult the relevant institutional policies and regulations, in this case, UNIAGRARIA internal guidelines on admissions and ethics. Third, disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority or supervisor. Fourth, follow the prescribed procedure for managing the conflict, which typically involves recusal from discussions and voting. Finally, document the disclosure and recusal process. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire from a particular student group to significantly alter the curriculum of a core agronomy course to align with emerging industry trends they believe will directly enhance their immediate employability, even if it means reducing foundational theoretical content. The university's administration is aware that this change could potentially alienate other student cohorts and faculty members who value the established theoretical depth. How should the university administration proceed? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review process involving faculty, students from all affected cohorts, and relevant industry experts to assess the proposed curriculum changes, considering both immediate employability and long-term academic rigor, and ensuring alignment with UNIAGRARIA educational mission and regulatory framework. Option B. Agree to a partial implementation of the requested changes, focusing only on the aspects that are least likely to cause significant faculty disagreement, even if it means a fragmented and potentially less effective curriculum. Option C. Immediately implement the requested curriculum changes to satisfy the vocal student group, prioritizing their perceived immediate career benefits. Option D. Politely decline the request, citing the need to maintain the established curriculum's academic integrity without further discussion. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive review process involving faculty, students from all affected cohorts, and relevant industry experts to assess the proposed curriculum changes, considering both immediate employability and long-term academic rigor, and ensuring alignment with UNIAGRARIA educational mission and regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the immediate financial interests of a specific stakeholder group against the broader, long-term sustainability and ethical obligations of the university. The pressure to secure funding can create a temptation to overlook potential ethical compromises or regulatory ambiguities. Careful judgment is required to balance competing interests while upholding the foundational principles of academic integrity and responsible resource management. The correct approach involves a transparent and inclusive process that prioritizes the university's mission and ethical guidelines over immediate financial gains. This approach involves thoroughly investigating the feedback, assessing potential conflicts of interest, and engaging relevant internal and external stakeholders in a discussion about the proposed changes. The justification lies in adhering to UNIAGRARIA commitment to ethical conduct, as likely outlined in its internal regulations and the broader Colombian legal framework governing higher education institutions, which emphasizes transparency, accountability, and the pursuit of academic excellence. This includes considering the impact on all students and the academic community, not just the vocal stakeholder group. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the immediate financial demands without due diligence fails to uphold the university's ethical obligations. This could lead to decisions that compromise academic quality, create unfair advantages, or violate principles of equitable access to education, potentially contravening UNIAGRARIA internal statutes and Colombian educational policies. Another incorrect approach that dismisses the feedback outright, without proper investigation or consideration, demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and respect for stakeholder input. This can erode trust and create an adversarial relationship, hindering future collaboration and potentially leading to reputational damage. It neglects the ethical imperative to listen to and address concerns raised by those invested in the university's success. A third incorrect approach that seeks to appease the stakeholder group by making concessions that are not aligned with the university's core mission or regulatory compliance risks setting a dangerous precedent. This could lead to a gradual erosion of academic standards or ethical principles in response to external pressures, ultimately undermining the long-term viability and integrity of the institution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and the competing interests. Second, gather all relevant information, including stakeholder feedback, university policy, and applicable regulations. Third, identify potential ethical dilemmas and conflicts of interest. Fourth, explore various courses of action, evaluating each against ethical principles, regulatory requirements, and the university's mission. Fifth, consult with relevant internal bodies, e.g., ethics committees, academic senates, and if necessary, external legal counsel. Finally, communicate the decision and its rationale transparently to all stakeholders. Question 8. When evaluating an applicant's potential for success in an agrarian university program, which approach best demonstrates an understanding of the foundational principles and ethical considerations relevant to Colombian agrarian studies, considering both technical knowledge and regulatory compliance? Option A. Relying on personal anecdotes and opinions about farming, without reference to established agricultural science or legal frameworks. Option B. Focusing exclusively on advanced crop science and animal husbandry techniques, assuming technical proficiency is the sole determinant of success. Option C. Emphasizing broad general knowledge across various scientific disciplines, with only a superficial connection to agriculture. Option D. Prioritizing a comprehensive understanding of Colombian agrarian law, sustainable farming techniques, and the socio-economic impact of agricultural practices on rural communities. The correct answer is D. prioritizing a comprehensive understanding of Colombian agrarian law, sustainable farming techniques, and the socio-economic impact of agricultural practices on rural communities. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the foundational principles and ethical considerations relevant to agricultural studies, specifically within the context of Colombian agrarian law and university admission standards. The challenge lies in discerning which approach aligns with the spirit and letter of UNIAGRARIA entrance exam requirements, which are implicitly guided by Colombian legal frameworks concerning education and agrarian development. A deep understanding of these principles is crucial for ensuring fair and equitable admission processes. The correct approach involves a comparative analysis that prioritizes understanding the interconnectedness of agricultural practices with their legal and social implications within Colombia. This approach is right because it reflects the comprehensive nature of agrarian studies, which extend beyond mere technical knowledge to encompass regulatory compliance, sustainability, and societal impact as envisioned by Colombian educational and agrarian policies. It demonstrates an ability to think critically about how academic pursuits translate into responsible professional conduct within the Colombian agrarian sector, aligning with the university's mission. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical agricultural skills without considering the regulatory environment fails to acknowledge the legal obligations and best practices mandated by Colombian agrarian law. It overlooks the importance of operating within established legal parameters, potentially leading to non-compliance and unsustainable practices. Another incorrect approach that emphasizes general knowledge without specific relevance to the agrarian sector misses the core purpose of an agrarian university's entrance exam. It suggests a lack of focus and an inability to connect broader knowledge to the specialized field of study. Finally, an approach that prioritizes personal opinions or anecdotal evidence over established legal and academic principles demonstrates a disregard for evidence-based reasoning and the structured knowledge base expected in higher education, particularly in a field governed by specific regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the specific requirements and objectives of the examination. This involves identifying the core competencies and knowledge areas being assessed. Subsequently, they should analyze each potential approach against these requirements, evaluating its alignment with relevant legal frameworks, ethical standards, and the specific context of the agrarian sector in Colombia. This systematic evaluation ensures that the chosen approach is not only theoretically sound, but also practically applicable and compliant with the established norms. Question 9. The control framework reveals that UNIAGRARIA administration is considering significant budget reallocations for the upcoming fiscal year, potentially impacting funding for several agricultural science research projects in favor of administrative overhead expansion. Considering UNIAGRARIA foundational mission, which of the following approaches best aligns with responsible institutional governance and ethical resource management? Option A. Proceed with the budget reallocation to administrative overhead, assuming that increased efficiency in administrative functions will indirectly benefit research by freeing up future resources. Option B. Prioritize the expansion of administrative overhead based on the personal recommendations of senior administrative staff, without further consultation or impact analysis. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the proposed budget reallocation on all agricultural science research projects, consulting with affected faculty and researchers, and presenting a transparent justification for any changes to the University Council. Option D. Immediately halt all agricultural science research projects to reallocate their current funding to administrative overhead, citing the urgent need for administrative modernization. Correct answer is A. Proceed with the budget reallocation to administrative overhead, assuming that increased efficiency in administrative functions will indirectly benefit research by freeing up future resources. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions where resource allocation decisions can have significant impacts on different academic programs and student opportunities. The professional challenge lies in balancing the university's strategic goals, financial sustainability, and the equitable distribution of resources to support its mission of education and research, particularly within the context of an agrarian university like UNIAGRARIA. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not only financially sound, but also ethically defensible and aligned with the foundational principles of the university. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the proposed budget adjustments, considering their potential impact on the quality of education, research output, and student welfare across all faculties, with a particular focus on programs directly related to UNIAGRARIA Agrarian mission. This approach prioritizes data-driven decision-making, stakeholder consultation, including faculty, students, and administrative staff, and adherence to UNIAGRARIA internal policies and any relevant Colombian educational regulations concerning resource allocation and program support. The justification for this approach is rooted in principles of good governance, transparency, and the ethical obligation to ensure that resource decisions serve the best interests of the entire university community and its core mandate. An incorrect approach would be to implement budget cuts solely based on short-term financial pressures without a thorough impact assessment. This fails to consider the long-term consequences for academic quality and the university's strategic objectives, potentially undermining its mission. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize funding for certain faculties or programs based on subjective preferences or political influence, rather than objective criteria and demonstrated need. This violates principles of fairness and equity in resource distribution. A third incorrect approach would be to bypass established consultation processes, leading to a lack of buy-in from affected stakeholders and potentially creating internal conflict and distrust. This disregards the importance of collaborative decision-making and transparency in institutional management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and its scope. This is followed by gathering relevant information, including financial data, program performance metrics, and stakeholder feedback. Next, potential solutions or approaches are identified and evaluated against established criteria, which should include financial viability, alignment with strategic goals, ethical considerations, and regulatory compliance. Finally, the chosen course of action is implemented, monitored, and reviewed for effectiveness. This systematic process ensures that decisions are well-informed, justifiable, and aligned with the institution's values and objectives. Question 10. Analysis of a situation where a professor suspects a student's submitted assignment may contain plagiarized content based on a perceived similarity to publicly available online sources. What is the most appropriate initial step to take in accordance with the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA regulatory framework for academic integrity? Option A. Immediately report the student to external legal authorities for academic fraud. Option B. Confront the student directly with the suspicion of plagiarism and demand an explanation. Option C. Disregard the suspicion as the similarity might be coincidental and not a significant violation. Option D. Conduct a preliminary review of the assignment using available academic integrity tools and compare it against UNIAGRARIA established guidelines for academic misconduct before initiating any formal process. Correct answer is D. Conduct a preliminary review of the assignment using available academic integrity tools and compare it against UNIAGRARIA established guidelines for academic misconduct before initiating any formal process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for information to address a potential academic integrity issue and the university's established procedures for handling such matters. The pressure to act quickly must be balanced against the requirement for due process and adherence to UNIAGRARIA internal regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any investigation or action taken is both effective and compliant with the university's framework. The correct approach involves initiating a preliminary review of the submitted work against the established academic integrity guidelines of UNIAGRARIA, without making premature accusations or directly confronting the student. This aligns with the university's regulatory framework by respecting the procedural steps designed to ensure fairness and thoroughness. It allows for an objective assessment of whether a violation has occurred before engaging formal disciplinary processes, thereby upholding the principles of natural justice and the specific regulations governing academic misconduct at UNIAGRARIA. An incorrect approach of immediately reporting the student to external authorities without exhausting internal university procedures would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses UNIAGRARIA established disciplinary channels, potentially violating its internal statutes and policies on academic integrity. It also demonstrates a lack of professional judgment by failing to utilize the university's own mechanisms for conflict resolution and investigation, which are designed to be fair and comprehensive. Another incorrect approach of directly confronting the student with accusations of plagiarism before a formal review is also professionally unacceptable. This preempts the investigative process, potentially causing undue distress and reputational damage to the student if the initial suspicion proves unfounded. It also violates the principle of due process by not allowing for a structured and impartial assessment of the evidence, as mandated by UNIAGRARIA academic integrity policies. A further incorrect approach of ignoring the potential issue due to the perceived minor nature of the similarity would be a failure to uphold the university's commitment to academic honesty. This inaction could set a precedent for future misconduct and undermines the integrity of the academic environment at UNIAGRARIA, contradicting the spirit and letter of its regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, understanding and referencing the specific regulatory framework of UNIAGRARIA concerning academic integrity. Second, conducting a preliminary, objective assessment of the evidence. Third, following the prescribed internal procedures for reporting and investigation. And finally, ensuring that all actions are documented and conducted with fairness and impartiality, respecting the rights of all parties involved. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal that an applicant for UNIAGRARIA agronomy program has demonstrated significant passion for agricultural practices through extensive volunteer work and personal projects, but their academic performance in certain prerequisite subjects falls slightly below the stated minimum threshold in their high school transcripts. Considering UNIAGRARIA commitment to fostering future agricultural leaders and the specific admission guidelines for the agronomy program, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional ethics? Option A. Recommend the applicant for a preparatory program or a different degree that may have less stringent academic entry requirements, while explaining that their current academic profile does not meet the specific prerequisites for the agronomy program. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire profile, including their volunteer work, personal projects, and any supplementary materials, to assess their overall potential and passion for agronomy, while also considering the slight deviation in prerequisite subject performance against the spirit of the admission criteria for exceptional candidates. Option C. Admit the applicant based on their demonstrated passion and volunteer experience, as this indicates a strong future contribution to the agricultural sector, overriding the minor shortfall in prerequisite academic scores. Option D. Reject the applicant due to their failure to meet the minimum academic threshold in prerequisite subjects, as strict adherence to stated criteria is paramount for maintaining academic standards. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire profile, including their volunteer work, personal projects, and any supplementary materials, to assess their overall potential and passion for agronomy, while also considering the slight deviation in prerequisite subject performance against the spirit of the admission criteria for exceptional candidates. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in ensuring the integrity of academic admissions processes at UNIAGRARIA, specifically concerning the evaluation of applicant profiles for the agronomy program. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic excellence and fairness with the need to adhere strictly to its own admission regulations and the broader legal framework governing higher education in Colombia. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to unfair admissions, potential legal challenges, and damage to the university's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all evaluation criteria are applied consistently and transparently, respecting the spirit and letter of UNIAGRARIA admission policies. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's academic records and extracurricular activities against the established admission criteria for the agronomy program, as defined by UNIAGRARIA internal regulations and relevant Colombian Ministry of Education guidelines. This approach prioritizes adherence to documented procedures and objective assessment. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of transparency and fairness enshrined in Colombian higher education law, which mandates that admission processes be based on merit and clearly defined criteria. The regulatory framework for university admissions in Colombia, as overseen by the Ministry of Education, emphasizes objective evaluation and non-discriminatory practices. Therefore, a systematic comparison of the applicant's profile against these established benchmarks is the only professionally sound and legally compliant method. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the applicant's expressed passion for agriculture without verifying the academic prerequisites or documented achievements fails to adhere to UNIAGRARIA admission criteria. This constitutes a regulatory failure because it bypasses the established evaluation framework, potentially admitting students who may not be academically prepared for the rigor of the agronomy program. Ethically, it is unfair to other applicants who have met the specified requirements. Another incorrect approach, which involves prioritizing applicants from specific regions or with certain family backgrounds, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such practices are discriminatory and violate the principles of equal opportunity and merit-based admissions, mandated by Colombian law and UNIAGRARIA-owned non-discriminatory policies. This approach introduces subjective biases that undermine the integrity of the admission process. A third incorrect approach, which involves admitting the applicant based on a perceived future contribution to the agricultural sector without a rigorous assessment of their current academic standing, is also professionally unacceptable. While future potential is a consideration, it cannot supersede the fundamental requirement of meeting the established academic and competency benchmarks for admission. This approach risks admitting individuals who may lack the foundational knowledge and skills necessary to succeed, leading to potential academic attrition and a dilution of program quality, which is contrary to the objectives of quality assurance in higher education as stipulated by Colombian regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of UNIAGRARIA admission regulations, the relevant Colombian legal framework for higher education, and ethical principles of fairness and transparency. When faced with an applicant whose profile may present unique aspects, the first step is always to refer to the established admission criteria and guidelines. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from the admissions committee or relevant academic department is crucial. The decision must be grounded in objective evidence and consistent application of rules, ensuring that the process is defensible and upholds the university's commitment to academic integrity. Question 12. Process analysis reveals a potential for significant time savings in the harvesting phase of a new crop being introduced by a research project at UNIAGRARIA. However, the proposed accelerated harvesting method involves the use of a novel, less tested mechanical technique that could potentially increase soil compaction and alter local biodiversity in the short term. Considering the foundational principles of agricultural education and Colombian agrarian regulations, which of the following represents the most responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the accelerated harvesting method, assuming that any minor environmental disturbances will be naturally mitigated by the agricultural cycle and are within acceptable parameters for a research project. Option B. Conduct a thorough environmental and social impact assessment of the proposed accelerated harvesting method, including pilot testing and consultation with local agricultural experts and community representatives, before deciding on its implementation. Option C. Implement the accelerated harvesting method immediately to demonstrate efficiency gains, with a plan to address any negative environmental impacts after the initial harvest is complete. Option D. Seek immediate approval from the project supervisor to adopt the accelerated harvesting method, emphasizing the potential time savings and deferring any detailed impact studies until after the project's initial phase. The correct answer is C. Implement the accelerated harvesting method immediately to demonstrate efficiency gains, with a plan to address any negative environmental impacts after the initial harvest is complete. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in agricultural project management within the context of UNIAGRARIA entrance exam framework, which implicitly requires adherence to Colombian agrarian regulations and ethical principles governing agricultural development and university admissions. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for efficient project execution with the long-term sustainability and ethical considerations inherent in agricultural practices, especially when these practices might impact local communities or the environment. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any process optimization aligns with the foundational principles of responsible agriculture and the academic integrity expected of future agricultural professionals. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the proposed process changes, considering their potential impact on resource utilization, environmental sustainability, and community well-being before implementation. This aligns with the principles of sustainable agriculture and responsible resource management, which are likely core tenets of UNIAGRARIA educational philosophy and Colombian agrarian law. Such an approach prioritizes long-term viability and ethical conduct over short-term gains, reflecting a mature understanding of agricultural project management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without evaluating environmental or social consequences fails to adhere to the principles of sustainable development, a key aspect of modern agricultural policy and likely a consideration in UNIAGRARIA curriculum. This approach risks violating environmental regulations and ethical obligations to local communities. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment neglects due diligence and could lead to unforeseen negative outcomes, potentially contravening safety regulations or best practices in agricultural operations. Finally, an approach that bypasses stakeholder consultation, particularly with local communities or regulatory bodies, demonstrates a lack of respect for participatory governance and could lead to legal challenges or social unrest, undermining the project's legitimacy and UNIAGRARIA commitment to community engagement. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objectives and constraints of the project. This is followed by identifying all potential process optimization strategies. For each strategy, a thorough impact assessment should be conducted, considering economic, environmental, social, and regulatory factors. Consultation with relevant stakeholders and experts is crucial. Finally, the strategy that offers the best balance of efficiency, sustainability, and ethical compliance, while adhering to all applicable Colombian agrarian laws and UNIAGRARIA guiding principles, should be selected. Question 13. Research into the potential for a new genetically modified crop variety to address food security challenges in Colombia has been proposed for a UNIAGRARIA entrance exam candidate. The proposal highlights significant potential benefits, but also raises concerns about long-term ecological impact and requires substantial external funding from a private agro-industrial consortium with vested interests in the technology. Which of the following approaches best reflects the ethical and regulatory considerations for evaluating such a research proposal within the context of UNIAGRARIA academic mission and Colombian agricultural research guidelines? Option A. Emphasize the proposal's immediate economic benefits and its alignment with government priorities for food security, even if it means downplaying potential long-term ecological risks. Option B. Prioritize the proposal's scientific merit, methodological soundness, and potential for contributing to agricultural knowledge, while ensuring transparency regarding funding and potential conflicts of interest, and adhering to all relevant Colombian environmental and biosafety regulations. Option C. Focus primarily on the proposal's potential to attract significant funding from the agro-industrial consortium, as this would provide UNIAGRARIA with substantial resources for future research and development. Option D. Accept the proposal without extensive scrutiny, assuming that the private consortium's funding implies the research is already vetted for scientific and ethical soundness. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the proposal's scientific merit, methodological soundness, and potential for contributing to agricultural knowledge, while ensuring transparency regarding funding and potential conflicts of interest, and adhering to all relevant Colombian environmental and biosafety regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's academic mission and the potential for external pressures to influence research direction. Maintaining research integrity and objectivity is paramount, especially in an academic setting like UNIAGRARIA, where the credibility of its findings directly impacts its reputation and the quality of its education. The entrance exam aims to assess a candidate's understanding of ethical research practices and their ability to navigate such conflicts in alignment with established academic and potentially national agricultural development guidelines. The correct approach involves prioritizing the scientific merit and ethical considerations of the research proposal, irrespective of potential funding sources or perceived immediate applicability. This aligns with the fundamental principles of academic freedom and research ethics, which emphasize unbiased inquiry and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, while also adhering to any specific Colombian regulations or UNIAGRARIA internal policies governing research integrity and funding. The focus should be on the proposal's methodological soundness, ethical implications, and contribution to the field, rather than its immediate economic or political appeal. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on securing funding, without adequate consideration for the research's scientific rigor or ethical implications, would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to biased research, compromised findings, and a breach of academic integrity. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, politically favored outcomes over objective scientific inquiry would similarly undermine the research process and violate ethical research standards. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to consider the potential environmental or social impacts of the proposed research, as might be stipulated by Colombian environmental or agricultural regulations, would also be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the research proposal's scientific validity and ethical implications. This should be followed by a review of relevant university policies and any applicable national regulations governing research. Transparency regarding funding sources and potential conflicts of interest is crucial. When faced with external pressures, professionals must be prepared to advocate for the integrity of the research process, even if it means rejecting certain proposals or funding opportunities that compromise these principles. Question 14. Strategic planning requires UNIAGRARIA to develop a comprehensive roadmap for its future, considering the diverse interests of its stakeholders and the specific regulatory environment for Colombian higher education. Which of the following approaches best ensures the plan's relevance, legitimacy, and successful implementation? Option A. Focusing on immediate operational improvements and short-term goals that address current student and faculty concerns, deferring long-term visioning to a later stage. Option B. Developing the plan based primarily on current research trends and available external funding opportunities to position UNIAGRARIA at the forefront of innovation. Option C. Engaging in a broad consultative process with all identified stakeholder groups, systematically gathering their input and demonstrating how their feedback has informed the final strategic document. Option D. Prioritizing the perspectives of the university's administrative leadership and financial benefactors to ensure fiscal responsibility and efficient resource allocation. The correct answer is D. Prioritizing the perspectives of the university's administrative leadership and financial benefactors to ensure fiscal responsibility and efficient resource allocation. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for UNIAGRARIA's strategic planning team as they must consider the diverse interests of various stakeholders, including students, faculty, administrative staff, alumni, and the broader agricultural community in Colombia, while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing Colombian higher education institutions. The challenge lies in balancing immediate operational needs with long-term institutional vision, ensuring that decisions are not only financially sound, but also ethically responsible and aligned with UNIAGRARIA mission and the national agrarian development goals. The correct approach involves actively engaging all identified stakeholder groups in the strategic planning process. This means establishing clear communication channels, soliciting feedback through surveys, focus groups, and consultative meetings, and demonstrating how their input has been considered and integrated into the final plan. This approach is justified by the principles of good governance and transparency, which are implicitly expected of educational institutions operating under Colombian law. Furthermore, it fosters a sense of ownership and commitment among stakeholders, increasing the likelihood of successful implementation and long-term sustainability of the strategic initiatives. Adherence to the principles of participatory decision-making, often encouraged by Colombian educational policy, ensures that the plan reflects the collective aspirations and realities of the university community and its external partners. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize the interests of a single, dominant stakeholder group, such as the administrative leadership, without adequately consulting or considering the perspectives of others. This could lead to a plan that is perceived as inequitable or out of touch with the needs of students or faculty, potentially causing internal conflict and undermining the plan's effectiveness. Such an approach would fail to uphold the ethical obligation of fairness and inclusivity. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on external funding opportunities without a clear internal strategic vision. While financial sustainability is crucial, basing strategic planning primarily on available grants or donor interests, rather than on the institution's core mission and identified needs, can lead to a fragmented and reactive strategy that does not serve the long-term interests of UNIAGRARIA or the agricultural sector it aims to serve. This neglects the fundamental principle that strategy should drive resource allocation, not the other way around. Finally, an approach that relies on outdated or incomplete data without a robust mechanism for ongoing monitoring and adaptation is also flawed. Strategic plans must be dynamic and responsive to changing internal and external environments. Failing to establish systems for performance measurement and course correction would render the plan ineffective in the long run, failing to meet the dynamic needs of the agrarian sector and the university's commitment to continuous improvement. Professionals involved in strategic planning at UNIAGRARIA should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive stakeholder analysis. This should be followed by the development of a clear institutional vision and mission, which then guides the identification of strategic objectives. Throughout this process, continuous stakeholder engagement and feedback loops are essential. The plan should then be translated into actionable initiatives with defined metrics for success, and a robust monitoring and evaluation framework must be established to ensure adaptability and accountability. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that when faced with a community experiencing immediate food insecurity due to adverse weather conditions, but also facing long-term risks of soil degradation from current farming methods, a student applying for admission to UNIAGRARIA must propose a course of action. Which of the following represents the most ethically and practically sound approach, aligning with the principles of sustainable agrarian development? Option A. Propose the relocation of the community to a different agricultural region, assuming the current land is irrevocably damaged. Option B. Advocate for the immediate adoption of intensive, high-yield farming techniques to maximize food production, regardless of potential long-term environmental consequences. Option C. Implement immediate, short-term food aid while simultaneously initiating educational programs on soil conservation and introducing drought-resistant crop varieties for future planting seasons. Option D. Focus solely on providing emergency food supplies, deferring any discussions about farming practices until the immediate crisis has passed. The correct answer is C. Implement immediate, short-term food aid while simultaneously initiating educational programs on soil conservation and introducing drought-resistant crop varieties for future planting seasons. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a community with the long-term sustainability of agricultural practices, all within the specific legal and ethical framework of UNIAGRARIA entrance exam context. The decision-maker must consider the potential for short-term gains versus the risk of environmental degradation and the violation of established agricultural principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed solution aligns with the foundational values and regulatory guidelines that UNIAGRARIA seeks to instill in its future students. The correct approach involves prioritizing sustainable agricultural practices that respect the environment and ensure long-term productivity. This aligns with the core mission of an agrarian university to promote responsible land stewardship and agricultural innovation that benefits both present and future generations. Such an approach is ethically sound as it upholds the principle of intergenerational equity and adheres to the implicit regulatory framework of responsible agricultural development that would be expected in an academic setting like UNIAGRARIA. It demonstrates an understanding of the interconnectedness of ecological, economic, and social factors in agriculture. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate economic relief without considering environmental impact fails to acknowledge the long-term consequences of unsustainable practices. This could lead to soil degradation, water pollution, and biodiversity loss, which are contrary to the principles of responsible agriculture and could violate environmental regulations or ethical guidelines related to land use. Another incorrect approach that dismisses the community's immediate needs entirely, without offering any viable alternatives or mitigation strategies, demonstrates a lack of empathy and practical problem solving. While sustainability is crucial, ignoring the human element can lead to social unrest and undermine the very communities that agricultural initiatives aim to serve. This approach lacks the holistic perspective required for effective agricultural development. A third incorrect approach that suggests adopting unproven or experimental techniques without adequate research or risk assessment is also professionally unsound. While innovation is important, it must be grounded in scientific evidence and conducted responsibly to avoid unintended negative consequences for the environment and the community. This disregards the need for a cautious and evidence-based approach to agricultural development. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the problem, considering all stakeholders' needs and concerns. It requires gathering relevant information, evaluating potential solutions against established principles and regulations, in this case, those relevant to agricultural education and practice in Colombia, and selecting the option that offers the most balanced and sustainable outcome. This process emphasizes critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and a commitment to long-term well-being. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that a student's final project in an agricultural engineering course at UNIAGRARIA appears to have significant similarities to a project submitted by another student in a previous academic year, raising concerns about potential academic misconduct. The professor responsible for the course is aware of the discrepancy. What is the most ethically and procedurally sound course of action for the professor to take? Option A. Advise the student to withdraw the project and resubmit a new one to avoid potential issues, without formally reporting the discrepancy. Option B. Confront the student directly with the evidence and ask for an explanation, making a preliminary judgment based on their response. Option C. Discuss the findings with trusted colleagues in the department to gauge their opinion before taking any formal action. Option D. Immediately inform the university's Academic Integrity Committee and request a formal investigation into the student's work, providing all comparative evidence. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform the university's Academic Integrity Committee and request a formal investigation into the student's work, providing all comparative evidence. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the immediate need to address a potential product defect against the established protocols for reporting and verification. A student's academic integrity and the university's reputation are at stake. Careful judgment is required to balance transparency, fairness, and adherence to UNIAGRARIA academic and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation that respects the student's rights while upholding academic standards. This means gathering all necessary information, consulting relevant university policies on academic misconduct and appeals, and providing the student with a fair opportunity to respond before any disciplinary action is taken. This aligns with principles of due process and academic integrity, ensuring that decisions are based on evidence and established procedures, as implicitly required by any reputable academic institution's internal regulations and ethical codes. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student's work or impose sanctions without a proper investigation. This fails to adhere to principles of fairness and due process, potentially leading to wrongful accusations and undermining the university's commitment to a just academic environment. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the findings due to pressure or a desire to avoid conflict. This violates the ethical obligation to maintain academic standards and to address potential academic dishonesty, thereby compromising the integrity of the educational process and the value of the degrees awarded by UNIAGRARIA. A third incorrect approach is to leak the information prematurely to other students or faculty. This breaches confidentiality, damages the student's reputation unfairly, and violates professional ethics regarding privacy and the proper handling of sensitive information. Professionals in academic settings should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the core issue and relevant policies. Second, gather objective evidence. Third, consult with appropriate university authorities, e.g., Academic Integrity Committee, department head. Fourth, provide the affected party with clear information and an opportunity to be heard. And finally, Make a decision based on evidence and established procedures, ensuring fairness and transparency throughout the process. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA is conducting a comprehensive risk assessment for its upcoming entrance examination. A team member responsible for this assessment believes that understanding the typical academic background and potential challenges faced by applicants from diverse regions within Colombia could significantly inform the risk assessment process. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound method for this team member to gather this information, strictly adhering to UNIAGRARIA entrance exam guidelines? Option A. Consulting publicly available reports and statistical data from educational bodies and government agencies that analyze regional educational disparities and applicant profiles without accessing individual student data. Option B. Requesting informal feedback and anecdotal evidence from admissions staff and faculty regarding their perceptions of applicant challenges from different regions. Option C. Conducting unsolicited surveys of prospective applicants to gather information about their academic backgrounds and regional challenges without prior consent or clear institutional authorization. Option D. Directly accessing the personal academic records and demographic information of previously admitted students to identify patterns and potential risk factors. The correct answer is D. Directly accessing the personal academic records and demographic information of previously admitted students to identify patterns and potential risk factors. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the boundaries of permissible information gathering within the context of UNIAGRARIA entrance exam regulations, specifically concerning risk assessment. A deep understanding of these regulations is crucial to avoid actions that could compromise the integrity of the exam process or violate privacy. The correct approach involves a systematic and authorized process for risk assessment, adhering strictly to UNIAGRARIA established protocols for exam development and security. This approach is right because it prioritizes the integrity and fairness of the entrance exam, which is a fundamental requirement of any educational institution's admissions process. UNIAGRARIA regulatory framework, as implied by the exam's context, would mandate that risk assessments are conducted by designated personnel using approved methodologies and data sources. This ensures that any identified risks are addressed in a controlled and documented manner, preventing unauthorized access to sensitive information and maintaining the confidentiality of exam content and applicant data. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing applicant personal data without explicit authorization or a legitimate, documented need within the risk assessment framework would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of data privacy and security, potentially leading to breaches of confidentiality and undermining the trust placed in UNIAGRARIA. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on informal or unverified sources for risk assessment information, would fail to meet the standards of due diligence and professional rigor expected in such a critical process. This could lead to inaccurate risk assessments, ineffective mitigation strategies, and potentially compromise the fairness of the entrance exam. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing regulations and ethical codes. Professionals must first identify the specific objective, e.g., risk assessment for an entrance exam. Then, they should consult the relevant institutional policies and regulatory guidelines to determine the authorized methods and sources of information. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from supervisors or the relevant compliance department is essential. The decision should always prioritize adherence to established procedures, data protection, and the overall integrity of the process. Question 18. Consider a scenario where, during the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA entrance exam, you observe another applicant discreetly using unauthorized notes hidden within their exam booklet. What is the most appropriate and ethically responsible course of action to uphold the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Discuss the observed cheating with other applicants during the exam to gauge their reactions. Option B. Confront the applicant directly and ask them to stop cheating. Option C. Discreetly inform the examination proctor or supervisor about the observed irregularity. Option D. Ignore the observed cheating to avoid any potential conflict or disruption. The correct answer is C. Discreetly inform the examination proctor or supervisor about the observed irregularity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the foundational principles and ethical considerations relevant to academic integrity within the context of a university entrance examination, specifically for UNIAGRARIA. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate and ethically sound response when faced with a situation that could compromise the fairness and validity of the examination process. Careful judgment is required to uphold the university standards and ensure a level playing field for all candidates. The correct approach involves recognizing the ethical obligation to report any observed irregularities that could undermine the integrity of the entrance exam. This aligns with the fundamental principles of academic honesty and fairness that are paramount in any educational institution, including UNIAGRARIA. Specifically, reporting the observed behavior to the examination proctor or designated authority is the direct and responsible action. This upholds the regulatory framework of academic institutions, which mandates vigilance against cheating and ensures that admissions are based on merit and genuine understanding, not on unfair advantages. This approach prioritizes the integrity of the examination process and the principles of equitable opportunity for all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed cheating. This failure constitutes a breach of ethical responsibility, as it implicitly condones dishonest behavior and contributes to an unfair examination environment. By not reporting, the applicant allows a violation of UNIAGRARIA academic integrity policies to go unchecked, potentially disadvantaging other deserving candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the other applicant directly. While seemingly proactive, this can escalate the situation, disrupt the examination for others, and potentially put the applicant in an uncomfortable or even unsafe position. It bypasses the established procedures for handling such incidents and does not guarantee a resolution that upholds the exam's integrity according to UNIAGRARIA guidelines. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the observed cheating with other applicants during the exam. This constitutes a form of collusion or distraction, which itself could be interpreted as a violation of examination rules and further compromises the integrity of the testing environment. It also fails to address the initial act of cheating through the proper channels. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the institution's ethical code and examination regulations. When an irregularity is observed, the immediate and most appropriate action is to discreetly inform the invigilator or the examination supervisor. This allows the university authorities to handle the situation according to their established protocols, ensuring fairness and maintaining the credibility of the entrance examination. The focus should always be on upholding academic integrity through established procedures. Question 19. System analysis indicates that the Agrarian University Foundation of Colombia UNIAGRARIA is experiencing a surge in applications for its agricultural engineering program. An applicant submits their high school transcripts, but a crucial subject grade appears to be missing, and the official seal from their previous institution is slightly smudged, making it difficult to authenticate. The admissions committee is under pressure to meet enrollment targets. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action, strictly adhering to UNIAGRARIA admission guidelines and Colombian educational regulations? Option A. Contact the applicant's previous institution directly to obtain a clear copy of the transcript and a confirmation of the seal's authenticity, and inform the applicant of this process. Option B. Request the applicant to provide a notarized affidavit confirming the accuracy of their submitted transcript and a letter from their previous institution explaining the smudged seal, while temporarily holding the application pending verification. Option C. Reject the application immediately due to the incomplete documentation and unverified seal, advising the applicant to reapply once all requirements are met. Option D. Proceed with admitting the applicant to meet enrollment targets, assuming the smudged seal is a minor administrative error and the missing grade is inconsequential for the program's requirements. The correct answer is B. Request the applicant to provide a notarized affidavit confirming the accuracy of their submitted transcript and a letter from their previous institution explaining the smudged seal, while temporarily holding the application pending verification. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for enrollment data and the ethical obligation to ensure the accuracy and integrity of that data. The admissions committee must exercise careful judgment to balance these competing demands, prioritizing adherence to UNIAGRARIA established admission policies and Colombian educational regulations over expediency. The correct approach involves a thorough review of all submitted documentation, including the verification of the applicant's academic records against the requirements stipulated by UNIAGRARIA for the chosen agrarian program. This aligns with the principles of academic integrity and fair evaluation, as mandated by the Ministry of Education of Colombia and UNIAGRARIA internal statutes. It ensures that only genuinely qualified candidates are admitted, upholding the academic standards of the university and preventing potential future issues arising from misrepresentation or non-compliance with admission criteria. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate enrollment by accepting incomplete or unverified documentation fails to uphold the regulatory framework governing higher education admissions in Colombia. This could lead to the admission of unqualified students, potentially impacting the academic reputation of UNIAGRARIA and violating principles of transparency and fairness. Furthermore, it bypasses the established internal controls designed to ensure data accuracy, which could have repercussions for university planning and resource allocation. Another incorrect approach that involves making assumptions about the applicant's qualifications without proper verification directly contravenes the principle of due diligence required in admissions processes. This not only risks admitting unsuitable candidates, but also undermines the credibility of the admissions committee and the university. It neglects the responsibility to adhere to documented admission criteria, which are often informed by national educational standards. Finally, an incorrect approach that seeks to expedite the process by overlooking minor discrepancies without a clear policy or procedure for doing so introduces subjectivity and potential bias. While minor issues might sometimes be resolved, doing so without a defined process can lead to inconsistent application of rules and create a precedent for overlooking important verification steps, thereby compromising the integrity of the entire admission system. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the university's admission policies and relevant Colombian educational laws. This framework requires a systematic evaluation of each applicant against these established criteria, prioritizing accuracy and completeness of documentation. When faced with ambiguities or potential issues, professionals should consult established university procedures for handling such cases, seeking clarification from supervisors or relevant departments rather than making ad hoc decisions. The ultimate goal is to ensure a fair, transparent, and compliant admissions process that upholds the academic integrity of the institution. Question 20. The investigation demonstrates that a student's academic performance has significantly declined, and there are concerns about potential academic misconduct. While reviewing the student's general academic record, a faculty member notices a pattern of unusual activity in the student's online learning platform access logs, which might be indicative of unauthorized assistance. However, directly accessing the detailed content of the student's personal files or communications within the platform is restricted by UNIAGRARIA data privacy policy. What is the most appropriate course of action for the faculty member to take to further investigate these concerns while adhering to UNIAGRARIA regulatory framework and ethical guidelines? Option A. Formally request access to the student's online learning platform access logs and any relevant communication records through the established university channels, clearly outlining the investigative purpose and the specific information needed in accordance with UNIAGRARIA data privacy and investigation protocols. Option B. Share the observed suspicious activity in the access logs with other students to gauge their experiences and potentially gather informal corroboration before deciding on any further action. Option C. Ignore the suspicious activity in the access logs, as direct access to personal files is restricted, and proceed with the investigation based solely on observable academic performance decline without exploring potential contributing factors from platform usage. Option D. Directly access the student's personal files and communication history within the online learning platform to gather immediate evidence of the alleged misconduct, believing that the urgency of the investigation overrides standard privacy procedures. The correct answer is A. Formally request access to the student's online learning platform access logs and any relevant communication records through the established university channels, clearly outlining the investigative purpose and the specific information needed, in accordance with UNIAGRARIA data privacy and investigation protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The challenge lies in discerning when and how to access information that might be relevant to an investigation without violating privacy or data security protocols. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any investigative steps taken are proportionate, necessary, and compliant with UNIAGRARIA established guidelines and any applicable Colombian legal frameworks governing data access and privacy. Correct approach involves a structured and authorized process for accessing information. This means initiating a formal request through the designated channels within UNIAGRARIA, clearly stating the purpose of the investigation and the specific information required. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of due process and data protection, ensuring that access to information is not arbitrary, but is instead governed by established procedures and oversight. It aligns with the ethical responsibility to respect privacy and the regulatory requirement to follow authorized protocols for data handling, thereby minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or misuse of information. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing the student's personal files without authorization is professionally unacceptable. This action constitutes a breach of privacy and a violation of data security policies. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the individual's right to confidentiality. From a regulatory standpoint, it likely contravenes UNIAGRARIA internal data protection policies and potentially Colombian data protection laws, leading to disciplinary action and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the potential relevance of the information due to fear of overstepping boundaries, is also professionally deficient. While caution is necessary, a complete disregard for potentially crucial information can hinder a thorough investigation and fail to address the underlying issues. This approach lacks proactive problem solving and may indicate an unwillingness to engage with the investigative process responsibly. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of UNIAGRARIA investigative procedures and data access policies. When faced with a situation where information might be relevant, but its access is restricted, the professional should first consult internal guidelines. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from a supervisor or the relevant compliance department is crucial. The decision should always prioritize adherence to established protocols, ethical considerations, and legal requirements, ensuring that any investigative actions are both effective and compliant.